there. My name is Wendy Amsellem. I teach here at Trisha Institute. And I'm going to be speaking about V'Zot HaBracha, which will be read on the morning of Simchat Torah. V'Zot HaBracha is the very last parashat in the Torah. And it begins with Moshe's address to the people and sort of includes many beautiful brachot that he gives the tribes. But at the very beginning, before he begins his brachot, in the second pasuk of the parasha, it's written, Vayomar Hashem miSinai ba v'zarach meSeir lamo. The Lord came from Sinai and shone forth from Seir. Hofia mehar Paran. God appeared from Mount Paran, Batami Rivavot Kodesh, and approached from Rivavot Kodesh, Miyamino Ishdat Lamo, lightning flashing at them from God's right. So in its context, it seems that Moshe is describing kind of the scene at the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. But a whole midrashic tradition has evolved about the particulars of this verse. The verse begins with God appearing from Sinai, but then it talks about God shining forth from Seir, which is the place that is associated with the nation of Esav, or Edom, and also appearing in Har Paran, which is associated with the descendants of Ishmael. Ishmael lives in Midbar Paran. As a result, a particular motif has evolved in the Midrash that prior to God offering the Torah to the people of Israel at Mount Sinai, God first goes to these other places, to Seir and to Paran, and offers the Torah to other nations as well. And I want to very much thank my friend Tammy Jacobowitz for pointing these midrashim out to me. The earliest instance of the midrash is in the Mechilta, which is a work of Tannaitic midrash from around the 2nd century or so. And there, what the midrash says is that God offers the Torah to all the other nations first, kidei shelo litain pitchon pelehem klapei shechina, so that way the other nations wouldn't have an argument to make to God. Right? The theory is that the other nations might say to God, "Look, if you had offered us the Torah, we would have accepted it. It's really not fair that you only offered it to Israel." And so, in order to avoid that potential argument, God sort of preemptively offers it to the other nations. In this version of the Midrash, God first appears to the descendants of Esav. That's why in the verse it says, V'zarach meSeir lamo. God shines out from Seir, the place where the descendants of Esav live. And God says to the descendants of Esav, Mikablim atem et haTorah, will you accept the Torah? And the descendants of Esav say, well, what's written in the Torah? And God says, it says, Lo tirtzach, you shouldn't kill. At which point the descendants of Esav say, look, Zohi Yerusha shehu yishenu avinu, right? This is the inheritance that our father gave us, that we will live by our sword. Al charbachat yichyah, you live by your sword. We can't possibly accept the Torah. God then, in the Midrash, appears to the descendants of Ammon and Moab and says, will you accept the Torah? They too ask what's inside the Torah, and God says, you shall not commit incest. And they say, well, we're all descendants of incest. We were the product of Lot's incestuous relationship with his daughters, so we can't possibly accept the Torah. God then appears to the descendants of Ishmael and says, will you accept the Torah? And they say, well, what's in the Torah? And God says, it says you shouldn't steal. And they say, well, we can't accept the Torah. Either this is the bracha that the angel gave to our mother, right, that we will be, that Ishmael will be a para adam yado bakol v'yad kol bo, will be a wild man, his hand will be in everybody's things, and this is our blessing. We can't possibly accept the Torah if it contravenes that blessing. And then at the end of the Midrash, God appears to Israel, and they don't ask what's inside the Torah. Instead, they all open their mouths and say, Kol asher diber Hashem na'aseh v'nishma, whatever God said, we will do and we will hear, and as a result, they are the ones who get the Torah. So that's sort of the earliest version of the Midrash and the most famous one, and it seems that the point is God doesn't want to give the other nations the opportunity to argue later that they might have accepted the Torah had they been offered it, and so therefore God first offers it to them, and sure enough, they don't accept it. Now, it is also the case that God seems to, in this Midrash, engineer the situation by which they will not accept it, right? Each nation is told the thing in the Torah that most would be difficult for them. But all the same, in the end, they reject the Torah, and the people of Israel get it, and it seems that that is a very special quality of the people of Israel, that they don't ask, they just accept it. Now, the same motif of the other nations being offered the Torah and not accepting it actually appears in two other midrashim in slightly different ways. It appears also in Shemot Rabbah. The same thing happens over there. God offers the Torah around. All the other nations refuse it. Only Israel accepts it. But here, those facts are taken to mean something very different. Instead of it just being about the specialness of the people of Israel, here in Shemot Rabbah, it's more about the special responsibility of the people of Israel. In Shemot Rabbah, a parable is told about a king who has a field that he would like to let to some sharecroppers. He offers it to the first sharecropper, who says, no, the field is too much work, I can't do it. The king offers it to a second and third and fourth sharecropper, who also say, it's much too hard for me, I can't possibly work this field. The king then summons a fifth potential sharecropper, who says, sure, I can take care of this field, no trouble at all. And then the fifth sharecropper, sure enough, does not work the field. He leaves it fallow. And the Midrash concludes by saying, who will the king be angry at? Will he be angry at sharecroppers 1, 2, 3, and 4, who said it was too much for them and never took on the responsibility? Or will the king be angry at sharecropper number 5, who agreed to do it and then didn't do it? And the conclusion is that, of course, the king will be angry at the fifth sharecropper. And so, too, the other nations who said that they could not accept the Torah, God is not angry at them for not accepting the Torah. Right? They knew their limitations. But the people of Israel, who happily accepted the Torah, now really have to make sure to keep it. Otherwise, they will be held especially responsible. A third kind of interesting reworking of this motif appears also in Eicha Rabbah, in the Midrashim that are on the Book of Lamentations. And here it's the same sort of idea. God has offered the Torah around. All the other nations have rejected it except for Israel. But here it's taken to mean something different again. Here the Midrash tells a parable about a king who gets very, very angry at his wife and tries to banish her from the palace, and the wife refuses to leave. And the king gets very angry and says, you're so brazen, I'm trying to kick you out. What are you doing here? And the wife says, you can't possibly kick me out. You owe me because I was the only woman who would have you. And the king says, what are you talking about? I rejected all the other women in order to choose you. And the wife says, oh yeah, really? How come I saw you in so-and-so, such and such alley, and this other little courtyard? Wasn't it because you were trying to get all these other women who rejected you, and only I accepted you? And the Midrash says, so too, the people of Israel say to God, look, you can't just exile us from the land, you can't kick us out, because we were the only nation who accepted you. God says in the Midrash, what are you talking about? I rejected all the other nations just in order to choose you. And Israel says, really? Well, then how come you offered the Torah first to the descendants of Esav, and then to the descendants of Ishmael, and to the descendants of Ammon and Moab, right? You offered it to everybody. They all turned you down except for us. And so therefore, you, God, have a special responsibility to us. You can't just get rid of us. And one of the things I think is very interesting about the Midrash and Eicha Rabbah is that it does take sort of the same set of facts and sort of turns it on its head. It's no longer about the particular responsibility that the people of Israel have to the Torah, but it's about the particular nature of God's responsibility to the people of Israel. And it almost seems in the Midrash that the people of Israel are a little bit offended that God has offered the Torah around to everyone else first, right? No one wants to be the last one invited. And it seems that is the sentiment that's being expressed here. And I would say it's kind of part of the general trend in Eicha Rabbah to try to point out the virtues of the people of Israel and argue for the need for God to forgive them. At any rate, on Simchat Torah, we not only read the Parashat V'Zot HaBracha, but we also celebrate the fact that we as a people have been given the Torah. And I think it's interesting to reflect at that time both on the particular joy of having received the Torah and also the particular responsibility that receiving the Torah confers both upon the people of Israel and also, I guess, upon God. Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach.